All right, we're good. Okay, great. So I am Sam Bagenstos. I am running for the state Supreme Court. You will see me on the ballot in November. You will not see me on the ballot in August. You will see me on the ballot in November. It's the nonpartisan ballot, so I'm going to say my name a bunch of times because on the nonpartisan ballot there are two important things. One is if you vote straight ticket, you haven't recorded a vote for the nonpartisan ballot. So a lot of people walk out saying, hey, you know, I voted for the Supreme Court because I voted straight ticket. No, vote straight ticket, that's great, but remember you also have to vote the nonpartisan ballot, look for the Supreme Court, and the second thing about the nonpartisan ballot is there are no D's or R's next to the name, right? It's nonpartisan. It's weird, right? I mean, I will be put on the ballot by the Democratic Party, but you won't know that when you look at the ballot. When you look at the ballot, what you'll see is a bunch of names. Two of them will have Justice of the Supreme Court next to their names. Those are the Rick Snyder appointees. You don't want to vote for them. The people you want to vote for are myself, Sam Bagenstos, and Megan Cavanaugh, who is the other Democratic nominee for the court. If we take those two seats, we will flip the court. This will no longer be a Rick Snyder, John Engler court for really the first time in 20 years. There was about 3 months in 2010. Otherwise, for 20 years, we've had a Rick Snyder, John Engler court. We can end that this year with 2 full 8-year terms up. So this is really important. You all remember Megan said, please applause. Yes, that's great. You should feel free to applaud before I do that, by the way. Just any time, jump in. So this is really important. It's a really important election, and it's an important election for a couple of reasons, right? In part because we can finally flip this court this year. It's an important election because we're seeing just how important the state Supreme Court is right now. We are coming at the end of a U.S. Supreme Court term in which Donald Trump has already secured a majority on the court, and we have seen decision after decision ruling against workers, ruling against voting rights, ruling against very important basic rights that people have taken for granted, and we have the threat with one more vote giving Donald Trump an even more solid majority on the court of the federal courts not being open for business to protect the rights of workers, to protect basic rights that people have counted on, and we need strong state courts to do that. That's why we need this court this year. The Michigan Supreme Court used to be a court that was known around the country for protecting workers. I teach employment law at the University of Michigan Law School. I teach cases from the 1970s in the Michigan Supreme Court that are leading cases protecting the rights of workers. Now we have a court that allowed prevailing wage repeal to go forward. We have a court that has been expanding the right to work law. So this is a very big change, and you know, we can do something about that this fall. We have a court that has taken the consumer protection law in this state that was the pride of the nation. It was one of the broadest and most successful and important consumer protection laws. Over the years, it's been narrowed and narrowed and narrowed by the Michigan Supreme Court. The Michigan Supreme Court will consider every issue that is of importance to your daily life, whether it's about your rights as a worker, whether it's about your rights as a consumer, whether it's about your right to clean water. And I'll tell you, everywhere I go in this state, people care about the water, right? Whether it's Flint, you know, whether it's Line 5 up north, people care about that. Whether it's PFAS all over the state, people care about that. People care about clean water. There are cases already moving towards going to the Supreme Court on all of those issues, and if they're not yet, they will be soon. The Michigan Supreme Court matters, and we can flip it this year. Let me tell you a little bit about me, Sam Bagenstos. I haven't said my name for a while, Sam Bagenstos. I need to do that because you need to remember my name. You know, I'm sorry, it's corny, but plus you've never met anybody named Bagenstos before, right? I'll bet. Unless you've been to a small corner of Iowa, you're unlikely to have met anybody named Bagenstos. But that's my name, so you got to remember it. So who am I? I teach at the University of Michigan Law School. I've been a lawyer working for workers, working for civil rights, working for the rights of ordinary people for nearly 25 years. I worked in the Obama administration under Attorney General Eric Holder in the Justice Department as a political appointee. Early in my career was a law clerk to Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the U.S. Supreme Court. Thank you. I know that applause isn't really for me, but that's okay, because you know I'm the next best thing. And what I have done my entire career is fight for the rights of workers and ordinary people. I fought for a woman named Peggy Young. Let me just tell you a little bit about Peggy. Peggy was a package delivery driver for UPS. She worked the early morning shift. What that meant was she would clock in at 5 in the morning. She'd go to an airport and pick up a bunch of envelopes, people sending stuff that has to be delivered first thing in the morning. She would go out and deliver those and then clock out at 9 in the morning. She'd go to her second job at that point, delivering stuff for a florist. On those 2 jobs, she was supporting her 2 kids. She was relying on the union negotiated health insurance she had from UPS for her family. She got pregnant with her 3rd kid. Her boss said, "I'm sorry you have to go home without pay, because if you're pregnant, you can't drive a package delivery truck for us." Now, if she had hurt herself at work, they would have given her light duty and she would have kept her job. She would have kept her health insurance. If she had hurt herself playing softball on the weekends, she would have gotten light duty and kept her job and kept her health insurance. And if she had a DWI and was unable to drive, they would have given her light duty until she cleared that up. And she would have kept her paying her health insurance, but because she was pregnant, they sent her home without pay. She was home for so long that she lost her health insurance. She thought that was unfair. She thought that was discriminatory. She filed a lawsuit. She lost every step of the way. She fought this in the court for years. 6 years in, I read the opinion of the Court of Appeals rejecting her claim. And I think this is just ridiculous. I talked to her lawyer and I said, well, I'm being filmed, I shouldn't say, but I said, I think you got screwed. I think this was unfair. This was not something that was right. And we talked and decided to take that case to the U.S. Supreme Court. I took that case to the U.S. Supreme Court. I argued it in the Supreme Court and won an important judgment for Peggy. Finally, after 7.5 years, she was able to get compensation for having lost her pay during pregnancy. And it was important for women around the country, establishing the principle that no woman should have to choose between having a job and having a healthy pregnancy. Also incredibly important. I fought for workers for collective bargaining. You all are probably familiar with the Janus case, one of the cases the Supreme Court decided this year, really attacking labor unions, attacking collective bargaining. The Janus case was the 3rd of a series of cases going before the Supreme Court in which well-funded interests, the same folks who brought right to work to Michigan, wanted to take right to work nationwide, not as a matter of politics, not as a matter of law that we could change by going to the ballot box, but as a matter of the Constitution, interpreting the First Amendment to require right to work in public sector employment. Now, we lost that case, but in each of those 3 cases, I was standing up with workers. I was standing up for collective bargaining because it's good for both the workers and for the public at large to have strong and stable unions that can take the long view. Thank you. And thanks. I fought for the people of Flint when a federal judge threw out of court the people of Flint who were trying to hold Rick Snyder and his appointees and emergency managers accountable for the Flint water crisis. I took that case to the Federal Court of Appeals and won them their day in court. So finally we're a step closer to accountability for the Flint water crisis. And thank you. And I've been fighting for people's rights. I could go on like this. I could do a 2-day thing too. I mean, I'm not going to do it because it's late. You guys have other people you want to hear from. But I will tell you, I have been fighting for people's rights for nearly 25 years. We need people on the Michigan Supreme Court who have spent their life fighting for the rights of ordinary people. That's what I, Sam Bagenstos, have done. That's why I hope that when you get to November, you'll not only remember to vote all the way down the ballot to the nonpartisan ballot, you'll not only remember to vote for Sam Bagenstos. And there's a quiz later. I'm going to ask you my name. Before you can walk out of here, I'll take the name tag off and I'll ask you my name. Can't leave unless you tell me my name. Sam Bagenstos, just giving you a hint. But also, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everybody, when you're out knocking doors this fall, tell folks they have to vote all the way down the ballot and they have to vote for the Supreme Court and for Sam Bagenstos. If you vote for Bagenstos and Kavanaugh, you're going to flip the court. We're going to have a court that reflects the values of the people in this room for the first time in 20 years, and that's going to be really significant. So thanks very much. I really appreciate the chance to speak to you tonight. Yes, over there. So we will have yard signs after the primary. We don't want to confuse anybody before the primary.
Do you have a phone number? number, so.
Yeah, so Allie over there will get your information, and we'll make sure to get all the yard signs out. Absolutely.
You didn't make any comment about voters, not politicians, which is going on before the court right now.
Well, I mean, so you all know. There's not a whole lot I can say about it. The case is in front of the court, so everybody knows about voters, not politicians, right? 400,000+ people around the state signed petitions without a single paid circulator to get on the ballot this proposed constitutional amendment that would take redistricting away from the legislators who will then be elected under the districts they draw, and instead put it in the hands of an independent citizens commission. That would be a constitutional amendment that would be on the ballot this fall. Everybody seems to agree it has a sufficient number of signatures, but there is a lawsuit currently pending. A number of people who are opposed to that proposition don't want it to appear on the ballot. The Michigan Supreme Court next Wednesday morning is going to hear that case, and they're going to get to decide whether voters, not politicians, makes it to the ballot or not. So that's something everybody here should watch. Whether it makes it to the ballot or not, whatever the Michigan Supreme Court decides, I'll say two things. First of all, the fact that the court can make a decision like that, just like it made the decision about whether prevailing wage repeal should go forward, right? That shows how important it is to have fair people on the Michigan Supreme Court. But secondly, if Voters Not Politicians passes, this is something a lot of people have been focused on. If Voters Not Politicians passes, there will be this independent redistricting commission. There will be one entity of state government that can reject a redistricting plan drawn by that independent citizens commission, and that's the Michigan Supreme Court. So, if you read what Voters Not Politicians says and the way it's written, that's the one entity that can subvert the whole thing. So again, if you're voting for Voters Not Politicians, you want a fair Michigan Supreme Court so you can make sure that commission can do its job.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Any others?
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.